My name is Mia, and back in 2021, I was living in a small rented townhouse just outside Portland, Oregon with my cousin Zoe. We were both in our 20s, working unpredictable schedules and trying to pretend we were real adults. The place wasn't fancy, but it felt safe. We had a smart lock, a camera over the door, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. At least, that's how it was before Caleb moved in next door. The couple who lived beside us had moved out suddenly, and for 2 quiet weeks, the place sat empty. Then, one rainy Tuesday, we heard thumping on the stairs and found a skinny guy in a faded hoodie dragging huge tubs into the unit. The tubs were filled with action figures, toy robots, old horror DVDs, and what looked like pieces of homemade costumes. He kept dropping things in the hallway, muttering to himself as he picked them up. Zoe and I exchanged a look. We liked weird hobbies. We played games and watched plenty of nerdy stuff. So we figured we'd welcome him the same way we welcome anyone, with snacks. A few days after he moved in, we baked cookies and put together a little basket with tea and candles. When we knocked on his door, he opened it just a crack. His eyes flicked up at us only once before he stared at the floor. "Oh, yeah, thanks," he mumbled, barely moving his lips. We tried to chat, but he already looked like he wanted the door closed, so we didn't push it. We walked back to our place, saying the same thing. "Okay, shy guy." No big deal. For the first week, he was just awkward. Then he started showing up a little too often. Any time one of us stepped into the hallway, even for a second, his door would click open. It didn't matter if we were bringing in groceries, taking out the trash, or just grabbing a package. He'd pop out like he'd been standing there with his ear to the door. He'd ask for the most random things, too. "Got any tape? Do you have extra dish soap? Do either of you know how to fix a lamp?" None of the requests were dangerous. Just strange. And constant. Then he started knocking on our door late at night, asking if we could keep an eye on his place while he took care of something. What that meant, he never said. He wanted us to physically sit inside his home while he was gone. We always told him no politely, but he kept asking like he couldn't imagine why we wouldn't want to. Zoe joked he was becoming our bonus roommate, but her laugh always sounded tight. Things got truly weird one Saturday night. We were coming home from a birthday party around 2 in the morning. It was cold, the wind was loud, and the motion lights on the stairs kept flickering. When we reached the landing between our doors, we stopped at the exact same moment. Caleb was sitting on the floor, not leaning against the wall, not tying his shoe, just sitting there cross-legged in the middle of the hall, facing our door like he was waiting for it to open. When he saw us, his face stretched into this too wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There you are," he said, like we were children who came home late. I was getting worried. Zoe actually snorted because she couldn't believe what she was hearing. He frowned, and the smile snapped off his face like someone flipped a switch. We squeezed past him and locked our door as fast as we could. The next morning we checked the outdoor camera footage, and that's when the uneasiness turned into real fear. After we'd gone inside, he didn't return to his apartment. He sat back down in front of our door, same position, same blank face, and stayed there for hours. Sometimes he stared directly at the door. Sometimes he rocked slightly back and forth. The timestamp showed he left a little before sunrise. We sent clips to the police. They told us he hadn't broken a law. "He's in a shared hallway," they said. "Call us again if he tries to enter your place or threatens you." Nothing changed. For almost a week, he stopped interacting with us. No knocks, no strange requests, no sudden door opening. The silence felt so nice that we thought maybe someone had spoken to him and he'd backed off. We were wrong. Completely wrong. About 2 weeks later, he escalated fast. He started pacing in the hallway at all hours. Not walking pacing. Slow steps, then fast steps, then stopping right outside our door like he was listening. When we left for work, he'd whisper things we couldn't quite hear. When I stayed home, I could see his shadow moving back and forth under the gap of our front door. One night, when I stepped outside to grab a food delivery, he suddenly leaned around the corner like he'd been waiting. "You look nice today," he said, voice soft and strange. I muttered thanks and moved past him. He stepped too close and whispered, "Come hang out." "I don't like being alone." I told him no. He leaned in even closer, breath warm on my cheek, and said, "If you keep ignoring me, something bad might happen." Quiet things happen in buildings like this. I slammed our door shut so hard the frame shook. That was the first time I cried from fear instead of stress. Then came the notes. We'd wake up to pieces of paper taped to our door, sometimes folded neatly, sometimes crumpled like someone changed their mind at the last second. Some were filled with strange compliments. Others mentioned things he shouldn't know, like what color pajamas Zoe wore or what time I usually brushed my teeth. One note said, "I want both of you to be mine." Another said, "I watch over you while you rest." Our bedroom windows faced the backyard. We were on the second floor, but the ground there sloped down, making the building feel taller. I always told myself no one could see inside. Then one night I heard scratching on the outside wall. Soft at first, then a little louder, like someone dragging a stick along the siding. I pushed the blinds aside just a little. Down in the dark, near the edge of the motion light, a tall shadow slipped out of view. I told myself it was an animal. I didn't sleep more than 15 minutes at a time. The police still said they couldn't do anything. "It's just notes," they said. "It's just standing in the hallway." In the end, Zoe and I packed everything we owned into a moving van in one day. We broke our lease. We didn't even tell Caleb we were leaving. We simply disappeared. We moved into a different place across town, where the neighbors kept normal hours and didn't stare at our front door like it was the only thing keeping them alive. Zoe eventually moved out to live with her partner, and we're still close. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I imagine the sound of slow footsteps outside my door. Sometimes I picture those notes taped to the wood. And every now and then, without meaning to, I check the hallway camera before I open the door, half expecting to see someone sitting cross-legged on the floor, waiting for me to come home. When I was in 6th grade, back in 1998, a new family moved into the old rental cabin across from my aunt's place in Maple Ridge, Wisconsin. My aunt owned the land and always complained about how hard it was to find decent renters. So when she told us a family with 2 kids was moving in, my cousin Liam and I got excited. We spent most of our afternoons together anyway, so the idea of having new kids to hang out with sounded great. The kids were Molly, who was my age, and her little brother Evan, who was a year younger than Liam. At first, they both seemed all right. Molly was quiet but friendly, in a way that made you feel like she trusted you right away. Evan, well, he wasn't like her at all, but I'll get to that. Their dad was the first thing that made us uneasy. His name was Rick, but he never told us that himself. We heard it from my aunt. Rick spent most of his time dragging junk into the yard, old mattresses, broken cabinets, dented metal barrels, even a rusted swing set that looked like it had been pulled straight out of a swamp. He stacked everything in strange piles, like he was building little forts out of garbage. Then every few days, he'd light one on fire. We got used to the smell of burning junk drifting through the trees. Some nights the smoke got thick enough that it looked like fog rolling across the road. My aunt called the sheriff 3 times that summer. Nothing came of it. After a while, we stopped expecting anything to change. Before things got weird, like really weird, the 4 of us spent a lot of time biking around the woods. Molly was easy to talk to, and she always rode ahead of everyone, her hair blowing behind her like she was trying to outrun the place she lived in. She told little jokes that made you smile without trying. I liked her right away. Evan came along sometimes, but he was different. He walked around barefoot, even when the gravel cut his feet. His face always had dry dirt or old tears on it, and he sniffled constantly. Once I saw him wipe his nose on the side of the cabin like it was the most normal thing in the world. One afternoon, Liam caught him peeing on my aunt's tomato plants. When she yelled at him, he just turned, grinned with this weird, empty look, and wandered off toward the woods without a word. Still, we kept letting him hang around because he was Molly's brother, and Molly felt like a real friend. Then came the bow. I didn't know Evan had taken it until he came marching up our driveway, carrying it like some kind of hunter. It wasn't a toy either. It was big, dark, and scratched up, the kind of bow someone used for real deer hunting. Rick must have shown him where he kept it. We were kicking a ball around in the yard when Evan lifted the bow, pulled the string back, and aimed the arrow right at Liam's face. The arrowhead was sharp and shiny, and I remember thinking that if he let go, it would go straight through my cousin's head. Liam didn't move. His whole body froze. His eyes got huge. I yelled at Evan to stop. He laughed, this high, shaky laugh that didn't sound like a kid's laugh at all, more like someone pretending to be a kid. Even after he stopped pulling the string back, he didn't lower the bow right away. He just stared at us with that strange little grin. My aunt came outside then, saw the bow, and screamed louder than I'd ever heard her scream. She grabbed me and Liam by our shoulders and dragged us inside so fast my shoes scraped the floor. After that, she banned us from going near the cabin. No more biking with Molly. No more letting Evan hang around. Nothing. But the siblings didn't give up. For almost 2 weeks, Molly and Evan walked over every day, knocking on the door, calling out our names. We hid in the living room with the lights off, while my aunt whispered for us to stay quiet. Sometimes Molly's voice sounded small, like she was trying not to cry. Evan didn't talk so much as pound on the door and make these strange humming noises. Eventually they stopped coming. The quiet that followed felt almost worse. A couple years later, the cabin sat empty again. My aunt finally had someone haul it off after the family left it full of trash, stains, and broken furniture. You could still see the outline of the place from the dead patch of grass and the pile of burned metal scraps their dad had left behind. For a long time, I didn't think about Molly and Evan. But then one night, I remembered something I had almost convinced myself wasn't real. It happened right after my aunt banned us from seeing them. I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard something moving outside my window. At first, I thought it was a raccoon. The cabin lights were off, and the whole road was quiet. I pushed my curtain aside just a little. Someone stood near the tree line, too short to be an adult. The moonlight hit them in just the right way, and I saw a shape I recognized. Narrow shoulders, messy hair sticking up in all directions, bare feet in the cold grass. It was Evan. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't waving or calling out. He just stood there facing the house, completely still, his head tilted slightly, like he was listening for something inside. I blinked, and he was gone. Completely gone, like he'd melted into the shadows. I locked my window, even though it was already closed. I stayed awake so long that the birds started chirping. Now that I'm older, I think about those 2 kids sometimes. Molly was a good friend stuck in a bad situation. And Evan, well, he acted wild and creepy, but maybe he didn't know how to be anything else. Nobody was looking out for him. Nobody was brushing his hair or teaching him anything. Their dad barely saw us. Their mom? I don't remember seeing her once. I don't know where they went after they left Maple Ridge. All I know is the image of Evan's face when he aimed that arrow, the sound of their knocking fading away, and the strange silence that settled over the woods once their family disappeared. Sometimes when I visit my aunt, I still looked toward the empty patch of land where the cabin used to stand. The trees around it seemed darker there, quieter, and every so often, I swear I hear footsteps on the gravel, just soft enough that I can't tell if someone's really there. I never check. Not after what I saw that night. I grew up in a small town called Willow Bend, the kind of place where people waved at each other from their porches and acted like nothing bad ever happened there. Looking back, that was probably why things got as far as they did. When a place feels safe, you don't look twice at the things you should. It was the summer of 1984, and my cousin Leo and I were practically glued at the hip. I was 9, he was 10, and we spent every warm day running around outside until the streetlights flicked on. Our neighborhood was quiet, with long rows of maple trees and houses that all looked a little old but cozy. Our parents never worried, as long as we stayed close enough to hear someone yell our names. Across the street lived a man everyone called Mr. Halden. He was in his late 60s, with thin white hair and tiny round glasses that made his eyes look too shiny. He always wore the same dark cardigan, even on hot days. When you waved at him, he'd lift one hand slowly, like it took effort. He wasn't friendly or unfriendly, just strange in a way that didn't register as danger when you were a kid. To us, he was the old guy who lit his porch lantern early. He had this rusty lantern hanging from a hook outside his door, and he lit it the moment the sky even thought about getting dark. That warm orange glow was always the first light on our street. One afternoon, he walked over to talk to my aunt while Leo and I played in the yard. He told her he liked kids and that he'd be happy to take us to the ice cream shack down the road if she ever needed a break. Back then, people trusted their neighbors by default. My aunt thanked him, and a few days later, she actually took him up on the offer. So about once a week, he'd shuffle across the street, lift his hand in that slow wave, and say, "Ice cream time, kids." He'd walk us to Frosty Pete's, a tiny shack with peeling blue paint and a cartoon seal on the sign. We'd order cones, sit on the wobbly picnic bench, and eat while he sat perfectly still beside us. That was the strange part. He almost never talked. He didn't smile. He just watched the street, tapping one finger on the table like he was counting something only he could hear. Sometimes a chill would run through me for no reason, but I'd brush it off. Free ice cream is free ice cream. Nothing creepy happened on those trips. No weird comments. No touching. Nothing that would set off alarm bells. But something felt off, like the feeling you get when a room looks normal but smells wrong. Then one morning, my aunt told us to pack our things. We were moving. No warning. No explanation. Just hours of boxes and garbage bags, and everyone rushing like the house was on fire. We left Willow Bend behind and moved to a small apartment in a nearby city. I kept asking why, but all she'd say was, "We need a fresh start, sweetheart." I didn't understand it. I missed our old place, the shaded yard, the long sidewalks, and even the sticky bench at Frosty Pete's. I missed how simple everything felt. A year later, we moved again, this time into a rented house on a quiet cul-de-sac. By then, I'd stopped asking questions. Adults made decisions, and kids followed them. That was just how things worked. Life went on. I grew older. Leo grew older. We stopped talking about Willow Bend. It became one of those places you think about only when something reminds you of it. Then, when I was around 15, my aunt finally told us the truth. We were watching TV one night when she muted the volume and stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then she asked if we remembered Mr. Halden. I felt my stomach drop before she even said anything else. She told us he was a registered offender, the kind you didn't talk about out loud in those days. There were barely any public lists back then. No online maps. No neighborhood alerts. The police didn't go door to door. The only reason she found out was because someone from the town knocked on our door to warn her. And the worst part? The town wasn't planning to report him. They were planning to deal with him. The woman who warned my aunt practically whispered, "Don't worry. We're going to take care of it soon." She said it like she was talking about cleaning up a fallen tree branch, not a living person. She also said the people on our street believed he was watching kids, waiting for an opportunity. He had been clever about those ice cream trips. While Leo and I hurried to order, he'd wander into the little general store across the road so that no one ever saw him standing alone with us. Adults saw us kids eating ice cream. They didn't see him walking beside us. They didn't see his hand always resting a little too close to our shoulders on the way there. Once neighbors realized he had shown interest in more than just us, they snapped into action. They didn't want police. They wanted silence. They wanted finality. My aunt panicked, not only because of him, but because of the neighborhood turning into something she didn't recognize. Within 24 hours, she had packed our whole house. She wasn't going to wait around to see what happened. She didn't want us anywhere near the man or the mob forming around him. When she told us all this years later, I went cold. I replayed every memory, every slow wave, the lantern glowing at dusk, the tap, tap, tap of his finger on the picnic table. All harmless on the surface, but suddenly so heavy. I realized something else too. During those walks, I always heard something under his breath, a soft humming sound, like he was repeating the same note again and again. I had forgotten about it until that moment. I don't know why it stood out. Maybe because it didn't sound like a tune. It sounded like a warning. A few years back, curiosity got the better of me, and I looked him up online. His name was still on the registry. It said he still lived in that same old house on Maple Lane. Later, when I checked again, his name was gone. The only time names disappear is when someone proves the person has died. So I guess the town followed through on what they planned. Even now, I can picture that lantern glowing on his porch. I can picture the ice cream shack and the sticky cones dripping down our hands. I can picture him sitting perfectly still, eyes too shiny, shoulders too stiff, humming quietly under his breath as we ate. I don't know what he wanted from us. Maybe he never got the chance to do anything. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment. Maybe someone stopped him before it ever came. Whatever the truth is, it hangs over those memories like a shadow. Not enough to ruin childhood, but enough to stain it. Leo and I never went back to Willow Bend. I don't know if Frosty Pete's is still there. I don't know if the lantern still hangs on that porch. And honestly, I hope I never find out. Some things are better left in the dark, especially things that once watched you from across the street. I was 11 this summer. The Carters moved into the old white house on Willow Bend Road. My mom couldn't stop talking about them. She said they were such good, godly people because they had adopted 2 kids. She made it sound like 2 angels had drifted down from the clouds and rented the place next door. But the longer they lived there, the more something felt off. Not in a dramatic way at first. Just little things that made your stomach tighten without knowing why. One Saturday afternoon, Mrs. Carter came over. Her name was Ellen, but she had that tight smile that made you think she didn't want anyone calling her by her first name. I answered the door, and she asked to talk to my Aunt Rosa, who I lived with at the time. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help it. Ellen whispered that she wanted to apologize for all the screaming coming from their house. She said her kids cried constantly and hoped the noise wasn't bothering us. Here's the weird part. We hadn't heard a single scream. Not once, and our houses were close. You could toss a rock from one porch to the other. I remember glancing at my aunt, waiting for her to say something, but she just nodded politely. When Ellen left, Aunt Rosa locked the door, even though it was still broad daylight. She didn't say a word, which made me feel even stranger. A few weeks later, Everything snapped into place, but in the worst way. It was August 1994, one of those heavy, humid days when the air feels thick and the world is too quiet. My uncle Sam was fixing his motorcycle in the driveway. I was inside watching cartoons when he burst through the door, breathing hard. He asked if I'd heard a scream. I hadn't, not even a whisper. He grabbed his shoes and told me to stay inside. Then he ran back out. I remember standing in the living room, frozen, listening for anything, crying, footsteps, voices. But the whole street felt empty, like the world was holding its breath. Later, I learned what he saw. The Carters' back door was open. Ellen was on the patio, screaming so hard she could barely catch her breath. Her little boy, his name was Toby, was lying on the concrete, not moving. She kept touching his hair, then pulling her hand away like she was scared of him. My uncle stayed with her until the police and ambulance arrived. But it didn't take long for the news to spread. Toby was gone. Everyone said it must have been a freak accident. A fall, a slip, something tragic but innocent. But the next morning changed everything. Police cars lined the street. Not just the regular ones, dark, silent cars with people who didn't smile. They put yellow tape around the Carters' house and started knocking on doors. That's when the rumors started. Someone said the investigators didn't believe Ellen's story. Someone else whispered that Toby's injuries didn't match a fall. And for the first time, people admitted something everyone had quietly felt. That house didn't feel right. That night I heard Aunt Rosa and Uncle Sam talking in the kitchen. She was crying softly, saying she couldn't believe something like that had happened right next door. My uncle barely said a word. He just kept rubbing his hands together like he was trying to wash something off. The police kept coming for days. Reporters showed up with cameras and bright lights that made the whole street look like a crime show. They asked if anyone knew the Carters. My aunt told me not to say a single word, even if someone tried to be friendly. Piece by piece, the truth came out. Toby hadn't fallen. He'd been hurt badly, and not just that day. His whole body told the story. Old bruises, marks that didn't fade, scars that didn't match a normal, happy childhood. And then things got even darker. People from their last neighborhood, 2 towns over, told reporters they'd complained about the Carters before. There had been yelling at night, strange noises, whispered stories about the kids missing school for weeks at a time. And more than once, someone had called child services, only for the Carters to pack their things and vanish before anyone could follow up. But the biggest shock came during the investigation. The children weren't adopted. They were bought. The news said, purchased, but the word didn't soften the blow. No one knew exactly where the kids came from. Some said a desperate young mother had been paid to hand them over. Others thought it was something worse, people who deal in children the way others deal in stolen cars. The Carters never explained. They barely spoke at all. Mr. Carter wasn't charged with murder, but he was arrested for neglect and other things I didn't understand at the time. Ellen Cold, tight-smiled Ellen, was sentenced to life. After that, the house sat empty. The windows stayed dark no matter how bright the sun was. Grass grew tall around the porch. Wind blew through the loose boards at night, and sometimes, if you were up late enough, you'd swear you could still hear crying from inside. Real or not, no one went near it. Eventually another family bought the place, but the street never fully relaxed again. Not really. Sometimes I think about how close it all was. I used to ride my bike past Toby in the yard. He always looked quiet, almost shy. I never thought anything was wrong. I don't think he knew how to ask for help. And I think about the other child, the little girl, Lily. She survived, but she lived through things no kid should ever see. I wonder where she is now. I wonder if she remembers that humid August day. I wonder if she still hears things at night, even when the room is quiet. It's strange. You grow up thinking your neighborhood is safe, because it looks normal from the outside. But danger isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it lives right next door and smiles at you from the porch. And sometimes you don't realize how close evil really was until you're older, looking back at a house you thought you knew and realizing you didn't know anything at all. The night my uncle was held at gunpoint still hangs over our family like a cold shadow. It happened in 2014 in a small town called Red Hollow, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and waved at every car that passed. Back then, I was 10 and living with Uncle Mark after my dad moved overseas for work. Mark wasn't really the spooky story type, but something about that night changed him. And honestly, it changed me too. It was a Thursday evening in late November, just after the sun dipped behind the pines. I was in the living room, half watching a cartoon, when I heard a sharp sound outside. It wasn't loud enough to be a gunshot, but it wasn't normal either. It was like someone slamming a metal pipe against the driveway. I remember thinking, that's weird. Uncle Mark doesn't own anything that sounds like that. Then I heard him yell. Not a normal yell. Not even an angry yell. It was a scared yell, the kind of sound adults make only when they truly think something bad is about to happen. I ran to the window and pushed the curtain aside. The porch light flickered the way it always did when the wind hit it just right. And in that flickering, I saw a man standing way too close to my uncle. He held a gun against Mark's stomach, and even though the man kept his head down, I recognized him right away. It was our old neighbor, Tom Reeve, the guy who lived 4 houses down. Everyone in town knew he had problems, but nobody ever said exactly what those problems were. Some said drinking. Some said drugs. Some whispered things even worse. Tom snatched my uncle's wallet, grabbed the truck keys dangling from Mark's fingers, and bolted toward the tree line behind the house. He moved fast, but not normal fast. More like someone running from something only he could see. Something chasing him. Uncle Mark came inside shaking. His face looked strange, almost gray, like he'd been carved from stone. He called the police with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. I remember the phone slipping once and hitting the table, and he didn't even pick it up right away. Just stared at it like he expected it to ring on its own. The police found Tom later that night. They said he was hiding in an old storage shed behind an abandoned gas station, clutching the gun and muttering to himself. They said he'd been drinking and needed money. But one officer slipped something extra to my uncle when he thought I wasn't listening. He said Tom kept repeating the same phrase over and over. They're coming. They're coming. They want me back. Nobody ever explained what that meant. Tom went to prison, and for a while things felt normal again. His beat-up white van wasn't sitting crooked in his driveway anymore. His yard wasn't filled with piles of scrap metal and broken lawn chairs. His house sat quiet and still, like it was finally sleeping. But even though he was gone, I still felt uneasy. I kept remembering the way the porch light flickered, and how Tom's shadow stretched across the driveway in a way that didn't quite match his body. 5 years passed. I grew older, taller, braver, or so I thought. Then one afternoon, when I was walking home from middle school, I turned the corner and stopped dead in my tracks. There it was, Tom's old white van, parked in his driveway like it had never left. My stomach dropped. I didn't even think. I just ran home and burst into the kitchen. Uncle Mark was sitting at the table with a cup of tea and his favorite crossword book. When I told him, he let out this long, tired breath, the kind that tells you the adult already knew what you were about to say. He served his time, he said quietly. He has the right to live in his own house. I didn't care about rights. All I could think about was that flickering porch light, that too long shadow, and the look in my uncle's eyes as he held his shaking hands in the air. That night, I barely slept. Every noise in the house felt wrong. The wind scratching the window sounded like fingernails. The pipes rattling in the walls made me picture someone creeping down the hallway. Even the refrigerator humming felt too loud, like it was trying to warn me. And then the nightmare started. In my dreams, Tom stood in our doorway holding the same gun, except this time the gun looked rusted and wet, like it had been buried in the ground for years. In the dreams, my uncle wasn't beside me. I was alone, frozen, unable to scream. Tom's face always looked strange too. Not angry, not drunk. Just empty, like someone had erased everything inside him except the part that wanted to hurt us. I'd wake up with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it shook the mattress. Some mornings, the sheets were damp with sweat, even though the room was freezing. For 2 whole years, Tom lived down the street again. I avoided walking past his house. I'd cross the road or take the long route behind the school fence. Sometimes, when the wind blew from that direction, I swear, I could smell something rotten. Not the normal rotten smell of garbage. This was sweeter, heavier, like fruit left too long in the sun, mixed with something metallic. But I never told my uncle that part. One spring, when I was 15, a for sale sign appeared in Tom's yard. Nobody knew why. Nobody even saw him pack. One week his van was there, and the next week it was gone. His windows stayed dark after that, and the house slowly grew quiet again. Uncle Mark heard from a friend that Tom moved to another state, maybe to live with his sister. I was just glad he wasn't our problem anymore. The nightmares didn't stop right away, but they faded. And eventually, I could walk past his house without feeling like something was watching me from the dark windows. But here's the part that still creeps me out. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind hits the old houses on our street just right, I hear that same metallic bang I heard years ago, and the porch light flickers, every time. Just once, like a warning. And even though Tom Reeve is gone, it feels like part of him is still here, stuck in Red Hollow, sitting quietly in the back of my mind. I try to forget, but some memories don't leave. Some memories stay awake. Back in 1998, when I was 10, my mom worked long night shifts at a hospital in another city. Because she was gone so much, I usually stayed with my Aunt Rosa in her small house near the edge of Pineberry Town. I loved her, and honestly, she was the calmest person I knew. She talked soft, moved slow, and woke up before the sun, like it was a habit she'd had for centuries. For the first few months, things were normal. Quiet breakfasts, warm blankets, the smell of her lavender lotion drifting through the halls. But a couple weeks after I started 5th grade, something strange began happening in her house. And by strange, I mean the kind of thing that makes the hairs on your arms stand up even when the room is warm. It started with her old beige landline phone. You know, the kind heavy enough to knock someone out, thick spiral cord, buttons that clicked loudly. She kept it on the nightstand next to her bed. Whenever she came home from work, the receiver wasn't on the base. Sometimes it was lying on the floor. Sometimes it dangled like someone had dropped it mid-conversation. And once, it was tucked neatly under her pillow, like someone had tried to hide it. At first, she thought I was playing with it after school. I kept telling her, again and again, I'm not touching it. I swear. But she'd just shake her head and say, well, Leo, who else could be messing with it? She wasn't mad in the beginning, just puzzled. But after it happened nearly every day, she started sounding annoyed, like she was tired of hearing excuses. The thing was, I wasn't lying. I didn't even like that phone. It made this weird buzzing noise when you pressed your ear to it, like something was breathing inside the wires. One afternoon I got home early, because school let out for a teacher's meeting. As soon as I stepped into the living room, I heard soft footsteps upstairs, 2 quick taps. Not heavy ones like Aunt Rosa made. These were light, almost careful, like someone was trying not to be heard. I froze for a second listening. The footsteps didn't repeat, but the sound had been so clear, it felt like the house was holding its breath along with me. Aunt Rosa's house wasn't big. From the front door, you could see most of the downstairs, the couch, the tiny kitchen, a narrow staircase. Upstairs, the hallway was short, almost cramped. Her bedroom sat on the left, mine on the right, and a tiny bathroom at the end with a window that barely opened. I slowly walked up the stairs, expecting to see Aunt Rosa home early. Her door was half open, and a strip of pale light from her window crossed the hallway floor. I pushed the door open. There was no one in the room. The curtains didn't move. The blankets on her bed looked untouched. Even the dust on the dresser seemed undisturbed. The only thing wrong was the phone. The receiver sat on the floor, stretched so far from the nightstand that the cord was pulled tight like a fishing line about to snap. And the way it lay there, that's what bothered me the most. It wasn't twisted. It wasn't curled. It looked placed, like someone had carefully set it down and made sure the cord didn't coil. I stood there, feeling my chest get tight. After a moment, I picked up the receiver and put it back. The phone rang immediately. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was so loud, it felt like the sound stabbed straight through the quiet room. When I answered, it was Aunt Rosa, asking why I sounded scared. I lied and said everything was fine. She told me she'd called earlier, and someone had picked up, but didn't say anything, not a word. They just stayed on the line, breathing softly. She thought it had been me. I told her it wasn't. I told her I'd heard footsteps. I told her the truth. She went quiet, then said she was coming home right away, and that I needed to go downstairs and stay by the front door until she arrived. She also said she was calling the police. I backed out of her room, keeping my eyes on that phone, like it might move again. Every step I took down the stairs felt louder than the last. I stood in the living room, staring up the staircase, waiting for something, though I had no idea what. About 10 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights painted the walls. A patrol car pulled up, then Aunt Rosa arrived right behind them. She hurried to me, hugged me tight, and asked the officers to check the house. Their boots thudded across the floors, upstairs hard, clear thuds. The same type of sound I'd heard earlier, except heavier and more certain. They found nothing. No open windows. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing. Everything exactly where it was supposed to be. Except the phone. One officer lifted the receiver and let it drop. It swung gently and then landed right beside the table, cord curling naturally. He tried again. Same result. He frowned at the phone like it had insulted him. They told us to lock the doors and call again if something else happened. Then they left. That night I slept in Aunt Rosa's room on a pile of quilts. Neither of us wanted to be alone. In the dark, the phone looked like a little sleeping animal. Every time it ticked or popped, which old phones do, I felt my whole body tense. The next morning, Aunt Rosa decided we needed proof. She pulled an old tape recorder out of a dusty box in her closet. It had a tiny microphone attached by a long wire. We set it on the dresser, pointing straight at the phone. The plan was simple. Leave the house for a while and see if the recorder caught anything. We went to a cafe down the street, but neither of us finished our food. When we came back home an hour later, the house looked the same. Quiet, normal, too normal. We rewound the tape and listened. For the first few minutes, there was just static, then a soft hum from the house. Then nothing. Then, around the 20-minute mark, thud, thud, 2 footsteps. Clear, sharp, too close to the microphone to be anything else. Then we heard a small click, the exact sound the phone made when someone lifted the receiver. And then silence. Aunt Rosa didn't even wait for the tape to finish. She said we were leaving. She didn't call the police again. She didn't pack much. just clothes and toothbrushes in her wallet. We drove to her sister's house an hour away and stayed the rest of the school year. A few days later, her neighbor, Mr. Janssen, called. He said he went inside to check the house and found the phone on the floor, the cord stretched tight just like before. Nothing else disturbed. Aunt Rosa thanked him and told him not to go inside anymore. She sold the house the same month she finally returned to check on it, though she never went inside again. The new owners never said anything strange happened, but that doesn't make me feel better. Maybe the weirdness stopped. Maybe it didn't. Years later, when I asked Aunt Rosa what she thought it was, she shook her head and said she didn't want to know. And honestly, I get that. I don't believe in ghosts. I really don't. But I do believe someone can slip into a place without leaving a trace. Someone skinny, someone quiet, someone patient. Someone who liked picking up phones and listening without speaking. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about those soft footsteps and the slow click of the receiver. And every time, the same thought creeps in. What if the person messing with the phone wasn't trying to scare us? What if they were waiting? Back in 2018, I lived in this cramped little basement studio on Willow Street. It had one small window near my bed that barely let in any sun. The place always felt a little too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. But the rent was cheap, and at the time that mattered more than comfort. Upstairs lived Monica, a warm, gentle woman, along with her teenage son and her longtime brother-in-law, Derek. She wasn't married to him. They were just family sharing the house after a rough patch in her life. She was the kind of person who brought down extra muffins when she baked. Derek wasn't like that. He was a heavy drinker, with this simmering anger always sitting right under his skin. But when Monica was around, he at least pretended to behave. 2 years after I moved in, Monica found a new job in another state and left. She took her son with her. And suddenly, it was just me and Derek living under the same roof. That's when the house changed. It felt heavier somehow, like something mean had been waiting for its chance. The first signs, Derek had always been rude, but once Monica was gone, he didn't hide it anymore. The first real blow-up happened over something tiny. I tossed a cardboard box into the shared recycling bin without flattening it. Instead of just mentioning it, he sent me a text that looked like someone had stabbed the keyboard with anger. He called me every insult he could fit into a message. I stared at the screen thinking, this can't be about a box. That wasn't the only time. It was just the moment I realized he didn't see me as a neighbor. He saw me as something he could yell at whenever he wanted. After one especially nasty interaction, I blocked his number and hoped things would calm down. They didn't. Parking problems turned dark. Working night shifts meant I always got home late. Parking on Willow Street was terrible. One night, close to 1 a.m., I parked behind Derek's truck, telling myself he wouldn't need to go anywhere that late. I planned to move my car by 7. But at 12:45 a.m., just after I'd changed into pajamas, someone started pounding on my door. Hard. Each hit rattled my shelves. I heard Derek yelling my name, spitting insults that echoed through the stairwell. I stepped outside to move my car, shivering in the cold. He followed me the whole way, shouting right behind me like some furious shadow. At one point, he lifted his hand like he might hit me. I stared straight at him and asked if he was really going to hit someone half his size. He just curled his lip and muttered something disgusting. I moved my car and locked my door behind me. My hands didn't stop shaking for an hour. That night, I decided I'd move out by October. I had no idea things were going to escalate way before then. When his niece arrived, Derek's niece, a 20-year-old named Amber, came by sometimes and stayed in the bedroom right above mine. Her window was always open. Mine stayed closed most nights because the basement air felt thick and stale, but that night I cracked it for a little breeze. I had the TV on at a normal volume when suddenly the ceiling thumped. Amber had stomped once or twice in the past when she thought I was too loud, but I usually ignored it. This time, I was tired of the disrespect, tired of feeling like a guest in my own home. I stepped outside and called up to her window. "Hey, if you think it's too loud, you could close your window." That was all I said. But she shot back like she'd been waiting for a fight. She yelled something about quiet hours, called me a loser who lived in the basement, and a bunch of other things I didn't expect from someone I'd never even talked to. I tried to stay calm, but she kept shouting, every insult sounding more like it came from her uncle than from her. Finally, I yelled back, "You really are just like Derek," and walked inside. The silence afterward felt thick and dangerous. The morning rage. At 7:20 a.m., I woke up to someone slamming on my door so hard it felt like the frame might crack. Derek was outside, yelling that I had insulted his niece, his voice shaking with rage. I grabbed my phone and recorded. He punched the door, rattling it in its hinges. I stayed quiet. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't make him worse. I called the police. They came. They shrugged. "Since he didn't actually hurt you, it's a civil issue." It felt like the walls closed in a little after they left. That afternoon, while I was carrying groceries from my car, Derek leaned out of the upstairs window and hurled more insults at me. His voice had this twisted sound to it, like he enjoyed every word. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling again, unable to relax. I moved my planned move-out date up to the end of August. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The scratching around 2 a.m., just as I started to drift off, I heard something outside my barely cracked window. A faint scrape. Metal on glass. I froze. Thought maybe I misheard. Then it came again, sharper this time, slow and deliberate, like someone dragging something pointy across the pane. My heart pounded in my ears. I crept toward the window and looked out into the backyard. Nothing moved. The grass shifted a little in the breeze, and the house above loomed like a giant shape blocking out the sky. Then I saw it, a tiny flicker of silver catching the moonlight, just long enough to know it was a blade. I slammed the window shut and locked it. The click echoed in the room. I backed away, every inch of skin tingling. I didn't sleep at all. Footsteps in the dark around 4 a.m. I heard footsteps directly above me, heavy, slow, and moving back and forth like someone was pacing. I knew Amber wasn't there. I had watched her leave earlier. Every step felt like it pressed into my chest. I stayed awake until the sun finally showed itself. When I checked the window in the morning, thin scratches lined the glass. Jagged, uneven marks like someone had dragged a knife along it just to see how far it could go before breaking. I packed even faster after that. The breathing a few nights later, things got worse. As I lay in bed, trying to distract myself with a quiet TV show, I heard it, breathing, right outside the window. Slow, steady, too close to be an animal. I couldn't bring myself to look. I turned the TV up just enough to drown it out, and after about an hour, the breathing stopped. In the morning, a piece of paper was shoved under my door. I opened it and stepped back. It was a crude drawing of a stick figure with a knife in its chest. There were marks on the page where the pencil had pressed too hard, like whoever drew it wasn't just sketching, they were angry. I called the police again. They looked at the paper, nodded, and said they'd talk to him. Their faces told me they wouldn't. Freedom at last. By the end of August, I had packed almost everything I owned. On the last day, I loaded the final box into my car and drove off without looking back. My new place was a second-floor apartment in a quiet building. No basement. No strange scratching on the windows. No drunk man pacing above my bed. That first night, I slept with the window open. The cool air drifted in, and all I heard was the steady hum of distant traffic. No footsteps, no breathing, no blades catching the moonlight. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. I finally had my peace back. And Derek, the man who had turned Willow Street into a nightmare, was nothing more than a memory I hoped would fade. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind hits my new window just right, I swear I still hear the faint scrape of metal on glass. I always get up to check, and I always make sure the window is locked.